Stephen Kapos. Stephen was born in Hungary in 1937 and survived the war in hiding using false papers. He was 7 years old during the Holocaust. Stephen was a member of the Labour Party until a public meeting of the Socialist Labour Network in January 2023. The Labour Party saw he was speaking at the event and sent him notice of an investigation. His response was to resign from the party, and there are some YouTubes we can put up which describe what happened. We'll put those in the chat as well, so you can see more details of Stephen's story. We're really pleased to see you here again, Stephen, and over to you. Thank you.
Hello. I think I ought to start with a little bit of explanation of the background in Hungary, which eventually led to the Holocaust. In Hungary, there has been in power authoritarian, almost semi-fascist government under the leadership of the regent, Admiral Horthy. And Hungary prided itself, or rather the Hungarian right prided itself of having introduced the first racial laws in Europe, beating Mussolini to it. And as a result of that, in the early 1920s, my father couldn't enter the university. He was applying for medical studies and had to do part of his training in Prague as a result of the numerus clausus laws, which limited the number of Jewish entries into university. So this was the first racial legislation in Europe, actually. And the authoritarian government carried on. The Communist Party was made illegal, and the trade unions were very much suppressed, and there was a kind of a social democratic party which by and large had compromised with the ruling forces. So Hungary, under the leadership of Admiral Horthy, entered the Second World War on the German side as allies of Hitler, in an opportunistic manner, actually, because he was hoping to regain so-called lost Hungarian territories, territories that Hungary lost after the First World War. This has led to terrible losses of life on the Eastern Front, particularly in 1942 and 43, when much of the Hungarian army was wiped out. As a result of the defeat, Admiral Horthy was beginning to wobble in his alliance with the Germans, who were well aware of that. And in March 44, they actually occupied the country, and to make sure that Hungary has not left in the same way as I think Romania was already leaving the alliance. So once the Germans arrived and occupied Hungary, the rightist and fascist forces were very much increased, and a virtual reign of terror started up under the extreme fascist groups that formed the so-called Arrow Cross groups. it became extremely dangerous for the Jewish population. I'm mainly speaking of Budapest, which I experienced. The deportations and establishment of ghettos in the countryside started very much earlier, but Budapest was considered more difficult to deal with because of the large number of Jewish population of Budapest. But as I say, since the occupation by the Germans, a virtual reign of terror was gradually established. And first, Jews were forced into special houses, kind of ghetto houses, which were all had a large yellow stars fixed on them, and it was a very fearful experience, because that was obviously introduction of the deportations from Budapest as well. It would be easier to collect people from these already concentrated houses. And I lived in one of those houses, but when things got even more dangerous, we as children were sent to join a series of homes run by the Protestant churches jointly with Swiss Red Cross, on false papers in various houses and villas of the Buddha Hills, which were considered to be relatively safer places as the Russian front was, the Eastern Front was reaching Hungary by then. This turned out to be completely wrong assumption, because the fighting was the fiercest around the Buddha Hills surrounding the royal castle, and we were falling into the front line at various times and had to escape. To illustrate how awful some of the atrocities were, I had a school friend, which I think I mentioned about in the past, who was arrested by these marauding Arrow Cross bands and taken to the Danube, lined up and shot into the Danube while holding his mother's hands, and his mother died and lost in the Danube, and he was only shot through the arm and managed to scramble out as the Danube took him down further, and he was rescued by some people who oversaw all this, and saw him scrambling out of the river quite a few yards further on, and he was rescued. And he later was my school friend after the war, very briefly, and he was really an orphan, and a very nervous but talented boy. Anyway, that was one extreme case, but I think, as well as the atrocities of the killings and arrests that were going on, I think one of the greatest traumas were the mental ones, the way families were divided, the way decisions had to be made, which were sort of sometimes fateful decisions in complete ignorance of facts and information.
That's 1 minute.
So having survived all these experiences and seen people in extreme danger and traumatized, I find that any invocation of the Holocaust experience in the service of the atrocities now committed by the Israeli state is completely unacceptable and is a disservice to the memory of the Holocaust. I think this is the real message, and I think that all those who had direct experience of it ought to speak up, and this is why I could not tolerate the Labour Party trying to prevent me speaking about it. I think that's really all I have to say, and ready to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We'll invite questions and contributions from the floor afterwards.